Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Legal Tings. Today, we're talking about separation as an alternative to divorce in Singapore. If you're thinking about splitting up with your spouse, divorce may often be the first option that comes to your mind, but it may not always be the only or most suitable option for you. In some situations, you may be concerned about the stigma surrounding a divorce from your friends or family, or you may not actually even meet the formal legal requirements for divorce because, for example, you've only been married to your spouse for less than 3 years. What's separation and how does it actually work? Separation could be a viable alternative to consider using instead of getting a divorce if you and your spouse want to live separately but are still willing to stay married legally. Separation can also be a feasible option when you and your spouse are still trying to reconcile or when you don't intend to reconcile but are planning to rely on separation later on as the grounds to apply for a divorce eventually. One way for a separation to take place is where you informally have an understanding with your spouse to live separately based on mutually agreed terms. During this period of separation, you and your spouse can live in the same house but should lead separate lives from each other. For example, there should be a discontinuation of spousal duties such as cooking or cleaning to look after each other. And you should also be financially independent from each other and ideally sleep in different rooms. Another way to carry out this separation is with the use of a written document or agreement called a deed of separation. This is a document that actually sets out the terms and conditions of your separation and covers things such as living arrangements and financial arrangements during the period of separation, and possibly even the terms that you both agree to take effect relating to the distribution of matrimonial assets, the amount of spousal or child maintenance, as well as child custody, care and control, as well as access terms when and if either of you file for divorce eventually. Obtaining a deed of separation is useful if you and your spouse are considering commencing divorce proceedings in the future, because the deed can and will address issues in advance that will need to be decided on later on during ancillary proceedings in divorce. And that's why a properly and well-drafted deed of separation may sometimes help to facilitate a smoother and faster divorce eventually. Judicial separation is yet another method of carrying out a separation, but this involves you and your spouse filing for an official judgment of separation from the court. To do this, you must have been married to your spouse for at least 3 years, and your marriage must also have been broken down irretrievably. If you're successful, you'll receive a judgment of judicial separation from the court, which is an actual court order. Filing for judicial separation can be a viable option if you feel your spouse will not voluntarily comply with a deed of separation and will only be deterred from breaching the terms of the judicial separation because a failure to comply with a court order is an offence. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of separation compared to divorce? Well, unlike a divorce, there are no prerequisites to you and your spouse starting separation proceedings because you and your spouse remain legally married during this period of separation. And so there is less stigma compared to commencing divorce proceedings. Separation through an informal understanding or with a deed of separation can also be more flexible than divorce because you and your spouse are free to agree on the terms of your separations yourselves. Divorce based on separation may also be a preferred option to prove an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage because you won't need to say which person was at fault for the breakdown of the marriage, and there's no need to prove wrongdoing on the part of either party. And this can reduce the potential for disagreements and therefore help to facilitate a smoother and faster divorce eventually. If you're not ready to get a divorce and still want to try to make your marriage work, you may also consider getting marriage counseling with your spouse, where a counselor can help you and your spouse to understand the difficulties in your marriage and suggest possible solutions to resolve the challenges and problems that you might be facing in your relationship. There are different types of counseling agencies available in Singapore, including government-accredited counseling agencies approved by the Ministry of Social and Family Development or MSF, independent counseling agencies such as secular organizations, voluntary welfare organizations, and family service centers, as well as those run by religious organizations such as churches and temples. How is separation different from divorce in Singapore? Well, when you are divorced, this means that your marriage has come to an end. In other words, you are free to look for another person to have a relationship and marry. In a separation, however, the marriage legally still subsists and continues, but it may be heading towards the divorce eventually. And so you can think of separation as a precursor to divorce. Under the Women's Charter, there are formal and non-negotiable requirements that must be met before you can file for divorce. For example, you generally must have been married for at least 3 years and must be able to prove the irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. However, and unlike in a divorce, there are no formal requirements for getting separated, and you also don't need to wait for any period of time before you can initiate or start a separation, but you won't be free to remarry while you're only separated and haven't yet been divorced. So now you know. If you have enjoyed listening to this and would like to hear more, subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts and follow me on TikTok and Instagram. And remember, it's not rocket science. It's just legal things.